Is there already some burning questions for the experts today? Yeah, I was expecting that you wouldn't dare to ask questions right now, but so maybe one question would be just a quick answer from each of you, and the French one I will adapt the question, but for the other ones, since you're here in France and maybe it's not your first trip here, have you noticed some things in our food system, in our food, in the food offer, and I don't know, that particularly strikes you or make you think, maybe because it's different from what you have in your countries and so on? Maybe just a little thought about that. So, Mark, you want to start? Or Tara, yeah, thank you.
I can answer. So I noticed that, I mean, apart from drivers being worse, I noticed that people are, on average, slightly less overweight than in Britain. There is actually markedly lower levels of obesity, and I was in the Netherlands last week. I'm not aware. In UK, do you know the prevalence in France? It's 17% of people in situation of obesity among adults.
70.
70, oh, okay. 17 obese.
Okay,
and obesity plus overweight is about 45 or 50%.
It's about, I know it's about 2/3 of the British public is overweight or obese. I can't remember what it is for obesity. It might be something like 30%, I'm not sure. So it is markedly higher. And the second thing is that it is still not a vegetarian-friendly country.
Sorry for yesterday evening.
Yeah.
Once again. Yeah, maybe. And for two French people, if you have conversely an experience you want to talk about your recent trip, or I don't know, related to food or physical activity, of course, not generally.
I don't travel much, sorry, but I try to lower my carbon footprint, so I kind of... what I was interested in is I try to go every time I am abroad in a supermarket. And we have discussions along the lines of front pack labeling, etc., in which we realize usually that there is a specific topic or a specific issue in each country with a specific focus on, I don't know, Portugal is particularly heavy on the question of sugary yogurts, for example. And then you realize why when you go to the supermarket of the country in question, because the offer is specifically very different in that particular area than it can be in France. So that you realize that the food offer, even if there is some form of transnational commerce with the same brands everywhere, there are some elements of specificity in which you realize why public policies may point on a specific focus for a certain type of foods, because the food offer is specifically very different in that area in particular.
What I can say is that I think in France and in some other countries also, I mean, there's this social, aspect of food, eating together. I mean, it's very important, eating, good food. But it's starting to be present in many other countries. I come from a country where this is extremely important, from Lebanon. So, and in France, it's basically similar, but maybe less so in other countries. I mean, when you go to Germany, very often it's not as much. But so I think this is something that is important in my mind.
Well, one impression I have is that pastries are everywhere, everywhere, from breakfast to lunch to dinner. I don't know whether you have a higher added sugar consumption or not, but I love those pastries, but certainly I don't want to eat them all the day and every day. But so that's one observation. And the second observation is that you have a smaller portion size compared to that in the US. I think that's really a good thing. I mean, even some of the pastries were relatively small, which is nice. And a major problem in the US is that large portion size and the fast food everywhere. The fast food, I think, is a huge problem. And you have some McDonald's, but no one is driving through the McDonald's here in the US. People drive through a fast food restaurant, not just drive through, McDonald's, Burger King also drives through Starbucks coffee. So you're sitting in the car and waiting for 20 minutes and just get, a big latte, and then you drive away. So that's really bad for obesity, and I guess it's no wonder that U.S. still the superpower for obesity, and currently 42% American adults, 42% obese, not just overweight. So.
I think for me, one of the great pleasures of coming to France is eating the cheese. It's a spiritual experience for me. And for the last 7 days, I've eaten probably my body weight in cheese. But in all seriousness, I think one thing I have noticed a lot here is the farm sizes are smaller than what we have in Australia. Australia has not just an industrial agricultural system, but probably what we'd call sort of more hyper-industrial. There are no, it's a free market, we have no agricultural subsidies. Whereas I notice in France that maybe it's through the Common Agricultural Policy, I'm not quite sure, but there seems to be a lot more government support for rural communities, for farmers, and also for the protection of traditional processing methods. And from that, I think the protection of traditional food culture in France, it's radically different to Australia, where it's, I'm not sure what our food culture is. It's an Americanized food culture, maybe. But I think, France has fast food, but it also has slow food. And the French are very good at eating food slowly, cooking it slowly, sourcing it slowly from farmers' markets. I think these are all things to celebrate. I think it's also why France could be perhaps a superpower for food in what might be, or what we might call a new food economy, one that produces healthy and sustainable foods, diets, but also healthy and sustainable cuisines, food cultures, and creating a food economy around something like that. Thanks.
If you're inspired, you're not obliged to answer. And maybe there are some questions. And yeah,
I was actually just thinking about Frank's point about food culture. I mean, it did sort of strike me last night when I was walking around, at any time that I come to France, that the really visible aspect of that is the bistros. And there is no real equivalent of that in the UK. I don't think the culture of people going out and sitting outside, and the fact that they're open to the street is very different. And you don't really get that in the UK. And I wonder whether the pubs have sort of been the equivalent in the UK. Somewhere you would go and sit with people, although you'd probably drink heavily. But it says something about that sort of shared culture that Rob Ayres has mentioned, the sort of the community culture. And in the UK, in my lifetime, I don't remember. I grew up in Ireland, which is different. But I think that might have died out in the 50s or 60s in the UK. That sort of eating out and that equivalent of a food culture hasn't been replaced. And restaurants, it seems to me, are not egalitarian places in the UK. They're not places that they don't feel relaxed to me. I tend not to eat out because of that. So there is something quite different there. I should probably read up on it. Maybe go to Lebanon as well, which has got fantastic food. So.
Yes, on the cultural side, the food culture is very important, but all elements of the culture I think are also important. And Tara mentioned, different, that people can have different perspectives, different questions. So I think another element that's linked with the culture is how the society accepts regulation and how market is taken as a religion, as you have in some countries. So I think this, and I can understand, some difference in opinions because of this. In Brazil, I talk Brazil, but maybe France is not very different. People accept regulation. It's not something. I remember when we have the tobacco, tobacco-free places, there was some reactions, and people know we cannot smoke. And then there was another legislation for outside tobacco prohibition also. And now, I mean, in a few months, people just accept. Okay, I mean, I can do the vaccination, for instance. In Brazil until recently. So people say, no, we need to vaccinate people. But now we start to have some problems, but coming from these countries where the individual freedom, I mean, I have the right to do any, I decide if I will vaccinate my children or not. So this type of culture, I mean, it makes solutions very difficult, because if we have to attend every person, I mean, this won't work. So I think this is something interesting to consider in the different solutions. Right?
It is, and this illusion of freedom, I mean, we make people believe that they are free to choose if vaccination is good or not, or if they want to eat this or the other thing. We always are answering the thing that with our guidelines, dietary guidelines, we prevent people from eating what they want. We have a chance in our country to have a whole bunch of innovative products, and why do we want to prevent people from eating? And so it's an illusion of freedom when we see all what's behind and all the determinants of all this offer. So yes, this illusion of freedom is really a debate in France. Yeah. Something you had a question.